Millionaire cries when he hears the beggar girl's request. Sir, please save my brother. Before we begin, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories reach. Now settle in. This one begins where few stories dare to go inside a courtroom in the middle of a sentence when everything changed. It was an ordinary Wednesday morning in Chicago, or at least it started that way. Judge Gabriel Ashford sat high behind the bench of Courtroom 5 at the Cook County Justice Center. At 45, he had become a legend in legal circles, sharp-principled, and utterly unshakable. The dark wood panels behind him gleamed under the courtroom lights, a fitting backdrop for the man who had sentenced criminals with ice in his voice and rarely a tremor in his conscience. His court ran on order, and Gabriel ensured it never slipped into chaos. The defendant on the stand, a man accused of embezzling from a children's charity, stared up at Gabriel with poorly concealed disdain. Gabriel's gavel hovered over the block. "You are hereby sentenced to 6 years in state prison," Gabriel said calmly, "with no opportunity for parole until after year 4. This court does not tolerate the exploitation of the most vulnerable among us." The sound of a gavel striking the wood echoed like thunder across the hushed room. That was when the courtroom doors burst open. Heads turned. Murmurs stirred like wind through dry grass. A small girl no older than 10 staggered through the entryway, clutching something or someone in her arms. "Please!" she screamed, her voice high and breaking. "Somebody help! He's burning up!" Gasps filled the room. A bailiff moved forward, confused and cautious. The girl was thin-soaked from the rain outside, with dark, tangled hair stuck to her forehead. Her clothes clung to her like wet paper, and her bare feet slapped against the courtroom floor as she took another desperate step forward. Cradled in her arms was a little boy, even smaller, his limbs limp and his lips an unnatural shade of blue. "Please," she sobbed again, staggering toward the bench. "He's dying, and no one will help us." Gabriel froze. It was as if the world had tilted. The bailiff reached for the girl. "You can't be in here, sweetheart. This is a federal courtroom." "I tried the hospital," the girl interrupted, her voice hoarse with cold and panic. "They told me to wait, but he couldn't wait. And the shelter turned us away because we don't have papers, and I heard them say a judge is someone who can save people." That was when Gabriel's eyes caught the glint of something silver hanging from her neck. A small broken pendant, half of a heart, a tiny number etched into the metal. Gabriel's own heart skipped a beat. That was not possible. Not now, not here. "Let her come forward," Gabriel said, his voice sharper than anyone had ever heard it in that room. "Sir," asked the bailiff, startled. "I said let her through," Gabriel repeated. The courtroom fell into stunned silence. The girl stumbled forward and reached the foot of the bench. Her arms trembled from the weight of the boy who had gone entirely limp. Gabriel stepped down from the bench. This had never happened before. Not in his 20 years on the bench, but nothing in his life had prepared him for the sight of this child barely standing, begging for help. "I'm Ellie," the girl gasped. "And this is my brother Mateo. Please. He's been sick for 3 days. He hasn't eaten. I think he's going to die." Gabriel knelt, ignoring the murmurs from the gallery. The boy's skin was hot to the touch, but clammy. His breathing came in shallow gasps. "How old is he?" Gabriel asked. 6, Ellie whispered, "but he's small for his age." "We need an ambulance," Gabriel told the bailiff. "Now." The courtroom burst into motion. EMTs were called. The judges' chambers were turned into a temporary triage center. The gallery emptied in a mixture of confusion and fascination. No one could make sense of what they had just seen. Gabriel stayed close to Ellie and Mateo as the paramedics arrived. He watched as they placed the boy gently onto a stretcher and began working on him. "Severe dehydration, possibly pneumonia," one of them muttered as he inserted an IV. "Temperatures spiking. We need to move fast." Gabriel stood back, but never took his eyes off Ellie. "Where are your parents?" he asked. Ellie shook her head. "Mama died last year. Car accident. They never found our real dad. The man who took us in Pastor Bell, he says we're his now, but he lies." "Does he hurt you?" Gabriel asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Ellie hesitated. "He doesn't hit me much, but he gives Mateo things to make him sleep. Sometimes he doesn't wake up for a whole day." Gabriel felt something tighten in his chest. This child wasn't just asking for help. She had risked everything. She had dragged her brother through a storm into a courtroom because every other door had shut in her face. Then there was the pendant. Gabriel remembered it clearly. He had given the matching half to his younger sister when they were separated in foster care. She had been 7. He had been 13. He had never seen her again. That pendant should not exist. Unless unless this child was related to her. Gabriel walked beside the gurney as Mateo was wheeled into the ambulance. Ellie clung to her brother's hand. "You're coming with us?" she asked, her voice small and afraid. "Yes," Gabriel said without hesitation, "I am." They rode in silence. Ellie refused to let go of Mateo's hand. Gabriel sat across from her, his mind racing. He texted a contact at the hospital to prepare the private pediatric ICU. He had no idea what he was stepping into, only that he had already stepped too far to turn back. At Wellington Medical Center, Ellie and Mateo were admitted immediately. Doctors rushed in, the best specialists money could summon, and Gabriel paced the hallway like a father awaiting word from surgery. After what felt like hours, a woman in scrubs stepped out. "He's stable for now," she said. "High fever, malnourishment, signs of prolonged exposure and stress. If he had arrived any later, it could have been fatal." "Will he wake up?" Ellie asked. "He's resting," the doctor replied kindly. "You did the right thing." Gabriel knelt beside Ellie in the hallway. The pendant was more visible now. She noticed him looking. "My mama gave it to me," she said. "She said someone gave it to her when she was a kid. She only had half of it. She told me the other half belonged to someone who would keep us safe." Gabriel felt the world tip again. "What else did she tell you?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. Ellie stared at him with wide eyes. She said, "If I ever found the person with the other half, I'd know they were family." Gabriel slowly reached into the inside pocket of his suit jacket. He pulled out a chain, long forgotten, but always there. A tarnished half-heart, etched with the same number. He showed it to her. Ellie's eyes widened. Her lips parted in disbelief. "No way," she whispered. You have it." "My name is Gabriel Ashford," he said quietly. "And your mother's name was Elena. She was my sister." Ellie stared at him, tears brimming in her eyes. "You're my uncle?" she asked, stunned. Gabriel's throat closed, but he managed to nod. "I think I am." Ellie began to cry, not the fearful, panicked sobs from before, but something softer, something that had waited a long time to come out. "Then, you're the one Mama told me to find," she whispered. Gabriel reached out and wrapped his arms around her for the first time, and in that moment everything changed. The courtroom was gone, the gavel silenced, and a man who had spent his life passing judgment was now being judged by the innocence of a child and the weight of a second chance. This was not the end. It was only the beginning. The hospital room was quiet except for the rhythmic beeping of machines and the occasional hiss of the IV line. Mateo lay on the bed, his cheeks still flushed with fever, though the worst had passed. Tubes fed into his arms and a cool cloth rested on his forehead. He looked impossibly small beneath the blanket. Gabriel sat in the armchair beside the bed, still dressed in his courtroom suit, though his tie had been loosened, and his eyes showed the strain of a day that had changed everything. Across from him, Ellie sat curled in the window seat, wrapped in a hospital blanket that dwarfed her thin frame. Her eyes hadn't left her brother in over an hour. Neither of them had said much since the truth about the pendant had come to light, that Gabriel might be her uncle, that somehow fate had led her to the one person her mother had always told her to find. Gabriel finally broke the silence. "Do you remember your mother well?" he asked softly. Ellie nodded without turning. "She sang to us every night, even when she was tired from work. She always smelled like cinnamon and peppermint oil. She said it reminded her of Christmas." Gabriel swallowed a lump in his throat. That sounded like Elena. She had adored Christmas as a child, always sneaking candy canes from the bowl on their foster parents' mantel. "What happened after she passed?" he asked gently. Ellie finally turned to look at him. Her expression was wary, older than her years. "She died in a car accident. I was with her. Mateo was home with our babysitter. After the crash, I woke up in the hospital. They said she didn't make it. A man came the next day and said he was a friend of hers. Pastor Bell. He showed some paper with her signature. Said she wanted him to take care of us." Gabriel frowned. "Did anyone ask you if you knew him?" "No. They just let him take us." "And did your mother ever mention this man before?" "Not once." Gabriel sat forward. "Ellie, can you describe what it was like living with Pastor Bell?" Ellie lowered her eyes. "He's nice in front of other people. He prays. He gives sermons. People bring him money and food. But when the doors close..." She trailed off. "You're safe now," Gabriel said gently. "You can tell me. He didn't let us talk about Mama. He said she left us because she was a sinner and that we were his now. He kept us locked in a back room most of the day. No windows, just a bed and a bucket. Gabriel's hands clenched into fists. What about food? If we did what he said, we got some. If not... She looked away. Sometimes he gave Mateo pills to keep him quiet. Did anyone ever come to check on you? Sometimes people visited, but he never let them see us. He said we were shy. And what made you run? Gabriel asked. Ellie's eyes flashed. Mateo got sick. Fever cough, couldn't eat. I begged him to take Mateo to a doctor. He said if he died, it was God's punishment. So I waited until he fell asleep, took Mateo, and ran. Gabriel sat back stunned. The courage it must have taken for a 10-year-old girl to defy the only adult in her life, carry a sick child through the streets of Chicago, and force her way into a courtroom, it was almost beyond comprehension. Ellie, he said carefully, do you know if Pastor Bell has other children living with him? She hesitated. Sometimes I heard other kids crying through the vents, but he never let us see them. Gabriel rose and walked to the door. He stepped into the hallway and pulled out his phone. Mr. Ashford said a nurse nearby your office has called 4 times. I will get back to them later, he replied. Right now I need to make another call. He dialed a number he rarely used, Detective Janelle Park. She answered on the second ring. Judge Ashford, she said, sounding surprised. You never call me on a personal line. This is personal, he replied. I need you to look into someone. Name's Nathan Bell. Calls himself a pastor. Runs some sort of home for displaced children. Is this about the girl from this morning? Yes. Ellie Ruiz. And her younger brother, Mateo. She says Bell took them after her mother died. I want every record you can find. Adoption papers, guardianship filings, background checks, everything. There was a pause. You think he's abusing kids. I think he's hiding something, Gabriel said, and I think he's done it before. Understood. I'll get started tonight. When Gabriel returned to the room, Ellie had curled up beside Mateo on the bed, her head resting on his shoulder. They both looked impossibly small yet unbreakable. Gabriel stood watching them for a long moment before he whispered, I should have found you years ago. The next morning brought cold sunlight through the tall windows of Gabriel's penthouse. He hadn't returned home since the night before. Instead, he had stayed at the hospital, sleeping upright in the chair by Mateo's bed. Ellie was already awake. She sat at the edge of the bed with a plastic fork and a fruit cup, cautiously feeding Mateo, who blinked up at her with sleepy gratitude. He's better, she said, noticing Gabriel. The doctor says the fever is gone. Gabriel smiled slightly. That is good news. Do you live in a castle? Mateo asked groggily. Gabriel chuckled. Not quite, just a tall apartment. Mateo nodded. You look like someone from TV, the serious kind, with a robe. I am a judge, Gabriel said. I help make decisions when people break the law. Are you going to put Pastor Bell in jail? Gabriel's face darkened. If he has broken the law, then yes. Mateo looked relieved. Good. He said I was the reason Mama died. But Mama loved me. She did, Gabriel said quietly. And none of this is your fault. A nurse entered with test results, and while she explained the latest updates on Mateo's condition, Gabriel's phone buzzed. It was Detective Park. I have something, she said when he stepped into the hallway. Go on. Pastor Bell has been running something called the Riverlight Fellowship for nearly 12 years. He's moved it 3 times, each time different children involved. But here's the thing. He's never filed a legal adoption. Not once. Gabriel frowned. What about guardianship forged signatures? I spoke to the state office. The signature on Ellie's mother's document doesn't match her actual writing from the hospital records. And there's more. 3 separate reports filed over the past 10 years. Suspected abuse, neglect. But none followed up on. The kids either disappeared or were too scared to talk. Gabriel exhaled slowly. Do you want to press charges? Not yet. Not until we have Mateo safe at home and more evidence. But I want eyes on that man. I want to know where he goes, who he talks to, and what he hides. You got it. But be careful, Judge. Bell is well connected. He has political donors. He gives speeches. He's untouchable to the public. That makes him dangerous. Gabriel nodded. I know. But he is not untouchable to me. That evening, Gabriel took Ellie and Mateo to his home for the first time. The elevator opened directly into the main room where floor-to-ceiling windows framed the Chicago skyline like a painting. Whoa, Mateo said, stepping inside. This really is a castle. Ellie looked around cautiously. She noticed the exits, the fire escape, the security keypad. Gabriel watched her. You're safe here, he said. I know she replied, but didn't meet his eyes. I want to show you something, he said, walking to the mantel over the fireplace. He picked up a small faded photograph in a wooden frame and handed it to Ellie. It was of a girl no older than 7 with wide eyes and a gap-toothed smile. Is this? Ellie started. Yes, Gabriel said. That was your mother, Elena. Ellie stared at the picture for a long time, then finally said, She looked happy. She was. We were in a foster home then. Not a perfect one, but safe enough. I gave her the pendant that day. She never stopped talking about you, Ellie whispered. She said her big brother would come for us someday. Gabriel felt his chest tighten. I am sorry it took me so long. You still came, she said. Mateo climbed onto the couch and curled up with a blanket. He was asleep within minutes. Gabriel turned to Ellie. Would you be okay with me taking care of you? Officially, Ellie blinked. You mean like, forever, I mean, until you are grown. And maybe even after that. She stared at him for a long moment, then nodded. I think Mama sent us to you on purpose. Gabriel felt something shift in his heart, something that had been locked away for decades. Maybe she had. But even if not, he would not fail them now. Not ever. By the time dawn broke over the Chicago skyline, a new rhythm had settled into Gabriel Ashford's once sterile home. It was subtle at first, the soft clinking of spoons as Ellie prepared oatmeal with deliberate care, the quiet thud of Mateo's footsteps padding across the hardwood floor, still wearing Gabriel's old hoodie that hung past his knees. The way the silence was now filled not with music or noise, but with breath, with presence, with a kind of careful hope. Gabriel observed from the hallway, coffee cup in hand, as Ellie helped Mateo into his chair at the kitchen island. She moved with the precision of someone used to doing far too much at far too young an age. She blew on his spoonful of oats, tested the temperature against her wrist, then fed it to him with a gentle smile. You make a good nurse, Gabriel said softly, stepping into the kitchen. Ellie looked up, startled, but smiling. I used to pretend I was one. Back when Mama would get tired after double shifts, I'd bring her tea and tuck her in. She'd say, That's better than any hospital care. Gabriel poured himself another cup of coffee and leaned against the counter. I've been thinking, he said, about enrolling you both in school. Or tutoring, at least. Somewhere safe, somewhere stable. Ellie hesitated. But what if Pastor Bell finds us? Gabriel's jaw tightened. He will not. I have a legal team preparing filings as we speak. And Detective Park is digging into his past. If he tries to come near you, he'll be met with consequences. Ellie looked down at her hands. He always said people like him never get in trouble. Said God's on his side. Gabriel crouched so he was eye level with her. God may forgive, but the law holds people accountable, especially when they hurt children. There was a knock on the penthouse door. Gabriel straightened immediately. Ellie tensed, instinctively moving in front of Mateo. Gabriel opened the door cautiously. Detective Janelle Park stood there, her coat still damp from the morning drizzle. She carried a manila folder under one arm and had the look of someone who had not slept. I brought everything, she said as she stepped inside. And you're not going to like it. Gabriel led her into his study and closed the door behind them. Talk to me, he said. Park opened the folder and spread out several documents on the desk. Nathan Bell has been operating a network for over a decade. He uses his status as a pastor to collect donations and present himself as a humanitarian. But he runs at least 3 houses across the city, where children are kept in conditions barely better than cages. No windows, no visitors, rotating caretakers who are undocumented and can't speak out. Gabriel picked up one of the papers, a grainy photo of a building in Inglewood. Its windows were boarded up. The sign outside read, Riverlight Home for the Lost. We have sworn statements from a former house cook who fled last year, said she witnessed at least 4 children disappear after punishment days. No records, no trace, just gone. Gabriel's hands clenched around the paper. Why has no one stopped him? He files just enough paperwork to pass casual audits. Donations keep coming in from local churches. And his charm? It's airtight. He makes speeches about saving souls and helping the forgotten. Even has city leaders attending his fundraising galas. Has anyone tried to challenge him legally? Park shook her head. A few social workers filed reports, but the kids were either too scared or too drugged to speak. And the guardianship papers forged. The state's database has signatures on file from deceased individuals. Do you have enough for a warrant almost? But we need one more piece. Testimony from a child in his care. Someone who has seen the others. Someone who can link the people inside to his orders. Gabriel's heart sank. You're asking for Ellie to testify. Park hesitated. Not formally. Not yet. But if she remembers where the other children were kept or heard names, we can build the case stronger. Gabriel looked out the window. Rain streaked the glass. The city below moved in its indifferent pace, unaware of the monsters it had allowed to hide in plain sight. She has already endured more than most adults, he said. If I ask this of her, it has to be her choice. Park nodded. Of course. But every day we wait, another child might disappear. Gabriel stepped out of the study and returned to the kitchen. Ellie had just finished rinsing dishes. Mateo was lying on the couch, half asleep, with a picture book resting on his chest. Gabriel sat at the island facing Ellie. I need to ask you something important. And I need you to know that you can say no. Ellie looked up. There are other children still living with Pastor Bell, he said. Detective Park and I believe they're in danger, but we need proof. You may know things that can help. Names, places, anything you remember. Ellie's eyes darkened. She turned her head slowly toward the windows. I remember the one with the painted windows, she said. It looked like flowers from the street, but inside it smelled like bleach and mold. Mateo and I only stayed there one night before Pastor Bell moved us to the church building. She turned back. There were 3 other kids there. 2 boys, 1 girl. The girl's name was Jasmine. She had a pink backpack with butterflies. She cried every night and said she missed her sister. Gabriel listened carefully. Do you remember the adults? Their names. Just one. A man with a limp. Pastor Bell called him Deacon Mark. He used to hand out the pills. That's enough, Gabriel said gently. That helps more than you know. Ellie's voice trembled. If I say all this, will they make us go back into the system? Like foster homes? No, Gabriel said, taking her hand. I promise you, I am here. You will stay with me. She searched his face for any sign of doubt. Finding none, she nodded. I'll help. That evening, Gabriel took the children on a drive through the city. Not because they needed to be anywhere, but because Ellie needed to see something. That the world was bigger than the walls Belle had built around her life. They passed playgrounds, bookstores, diners lit with soft yellow light. Mateo pointed at a pizza place with comic book murals painted across its windows. I want to go there someday, he said dreamily. We will, Gabriel promised. They drove by a fire station. Ellie leaned closer to the window. That's the one Mama used to walk past. She said the sirens sounded like angels trying to save someone. Gabriel turned the corner. Ellie suddenly straightened. There, she whispered. That's it. The flower building. Gabriel stopped the car, parked across the street. The building looked normal enough to an unknowing eye. Painted floral murals masked the boarded windows. A handmade sign read, Children's Haven. But the curtains behind the glass never moved. No lights flickered. No laughter drifted out. Gabriel took a photo discreetly and texted it to Detective Park. This is the place. Ellie confirmed it. Park replied within a minute. Got it. This is enough. We're moving forward. Later that night, back at the penthouse, Gabriel helped Mateo into bed. The little boy had finally begun to relax. The circles beneath his eyes had started to fade. He now smiled, even laughed softly when Gabriel made a face during story time. But Ellie remained watchful. When Gabriel returned to the living room, he found her sitting on the couch, holding the broken pendant in her hand. Mr. Gabriel, yes. If Mama hadn't died, do you think we would have found you anyway? Gabriel sat beside her. The city lights outside cast a soft glow on her face. I think he said carefully that the world has a strange way of bringing people together when it matters most. Ellie looked down. I used to think God forgot about us. Gabriel was silent for a moment. I used to think that too. When I lost my sister. Ellie turned to him. You didn't lose her. She just sent us instead. Gabriel smiled. I suppose she did. Outside, thunder rumbled low in the distance. But inside, the storm had passed. For now. Tomorrow the fight would begin. But tonight the children slept safe. And a man who had once believed in rules more than people now understood some things were worth breaking the silence for. The chapel was quiet except for the soft creak of old wooden pews and the faint hum of electricity behind the stained glass panels. Dust filtered through shafts of colored light that fell onto the worn floorboards like scattered confetti from a forgotten celebration. In the pulpit, Pastor Nathan Bell adjusted the collar of his well-pressed shirt, glancing once at the crucifix mounted above him before returning to the folder in his hands. The children were gone. Ellie and Mateo. Just like that. He pressed his fingers to the bridge of his nose, then flipped open the folder and examined the latest notes from his assistant. The names had been crossed out. The scribbled totals at the bottom of the page told him how much he had lost in the last week alone. 1 girl, 1 boy. But it was more than numbers. It was exposure. He had seen their faces on the local news 2 nights earlier. A brief segment. The judge who rescued 2 sick siblings from the streets. No names mentioned, but he recognized Ellie's thin frame instantly. And beside her, the judge himself. Gabriel Ashford. Bell's lip curled. He had known Gabriel years ago. Not personally, but by reputation. A rising figure in the court full of moral sermons and grand gestures. The kind of man who believed in black and white. The kind of man who could undo everything if he looked too closely. Bell closed the folder and walked down the narrow aisle of the chapel to the side door. Beyond it was a hallway dimly lit leading to a locked room behind the prayer hall. He unlocked the door with a heavy key, pushed it open, and stepped inside. 3 children sat on floor mats, their eyes vacant, their bodies still. Jasmine, the youngest, looked up when the door opened. Is it morning yet? She whispered. Bell's voice remained soft, syrupy. It is, little one. Time for your vitamins. The pills were ready in small cups. He handed them out without expression. The children accepted them without question. That was the power of routine, of fear dressed as mercy. He shut the door behind him and turned the lock once more. But even as the bolt clicked into place, something gnawed at the edge of his composure. Gabriel Ashford. That name would have to be dealt with. Back in the city, Gabriel sat across from Detective Park at a quiet diner tucked beneath the elevated train tracks. Ellie and Mateo were with a trusted social worker for the afternoon, attending a supervised play session designed to help children relearn trust. Ellie had hesitated but eventually agreed to go after Gabriel promised she could call him at any time. The detective slid a thick envelope across the table. These are surveillance photos of the flower house you visited, she said. We've documented 3 adults and at least 5 children coming and going at irregular hours. And we confirmed Deacon Mark is the man with the limp. He used to run a halfway house in Indiana which shut down after child neglect complaints. No charges filed, no children recovered. Gabriel looked through the photos. The images were grainy but chilling. Small figures escorted by larger ones. Windows always covered. No outdoor play, no smiling faces. We need to move, he said. We will, she agreed. But we need a clean case. Bell has connections with the local board. If we mess this up, it vanishes under red tape. Gabriel looked up from the file. His voice was cold. Then we do not mess this up. Detective Park nodded once. We're applying for a warrant tonight. Once approved, we move in. Gabriel's fingers tapped against the coffee mug, a steady rhythm of thought. How likely is it that Belle has already guessed where the children are? Very, she said. But he would not move openly. That would expose him. He will try something indirect, legal, manipulative. Like claiming custody again, Gabriel muttered. Park nodded. We need to be ready. Later that evening, Gabriel returned to his apartment to find Mateo building a puzzle on the living room rug, while Ellie sat cross-legged with a notebook in her lap, her pencil moving quickly. Homework? He asked with a smile. Ellie looked up. Not really. I'm drawing the flower building. From memory. So, if you need to show someone, they know what it looks like inside. Gabriel crossed the room and sat beside her. She had drawn the layout in remarkable detail. The front room with locked shelves, the hallway with 3 doors, the vent where she had heard Jasmine cry, the door that never opened. Do you remember what was behind that locked door? He asked gently. Ellie hesitated, then nodded. Once Pastor Bell forgot to lock it. I saw a ladder going down, like into a basement. I heard someone coughing down there. Gabriel placed a hand on her shoulder. You're doing something very brave. Ellie's voice dropped to a whisper. I'm scared. You're allowed to be, he said, but you're not alone anymore. The next day, everything shifted. A knock at the door. Not from police, not media, not social workers, but from a sharply dressed man with a leather briefcase and a falsely polite smile. I'm looking for Judge Ashford, he said. Gabriel opened the door partway, noting the man's expensive shoes and law firm badge. I'm Gabriel Ashford. My name is Leonard Crane. I represent Pastor Nathan Bell. I am here to inform you that Pastor Bell is formally petitioning for the return of Ellie and Mateo Ruiz, whom he has been legal guardian of for over a year. Gabriel did not flinch. He forged those documents. Unproven, Crane said smoothly. The state has no official challenge to his guardianship on record. Until you file one, he remains their lawful caretaker. They are not returning to him. Then you are harboring minors illegally, sir. Gabriel stared at the man. Do you have any idea who I am? I do, Crane replied. And that is why I am here in person as a courtesy. You have 48 hours to produce counterfilings. After that, my client will be forced to pursue legal avenues for recovery. The man turned and walked away. Gabriel closed the door slowly. That evening, Ellie caught Gabriel reviewing documents at the dining table. Her eyes lingered on the folders, the highlighted notes, the photographs. Is he coming for us? She asked. Gabriel paused. He is trying. She pulled out the chair across from him and sat down. Then we have to stop him. For the others. He nodded. We will. But we must do it the right way. Ellie reached across the table and touched the folder with Jasmine's name scribbled on a post-it note. She's still in there. I know it. Gabriel put his hand over hers. Then let's get her out. By noon the next day, the warrant was signed. By 3, the raid had begun. Gabriel watched from a secure vehicle a block away as SWAT officers in bulletproof gear stormed the flower building. Neighbors stood on porches. Children pressed against windows. It looked to the untrained eye like an overreaction. But Gabriel knew better. Inside that building were children who had learned silence from fear. 15 minutes later, the first officer emerged carrying a small boy, no older than 5. Then a girl with tangled hair and a pink butterfly backpack. Jasmine. Ellie clutched Gabriel's hand when she saw her, her eyes filled with tears. They found her, she whispered. Gabriel nodded, watching as medics checked over each child, wrapped them in blankets, and led them to waiting vans. Detective Park emerged from the building with a hard set to her jaw. He was not there, she told Gabriel. Bell is gone, but we have enough now. We found the basement, ledgers, names, photos. Then we move for arrest, Gabriel said. Yes, and protective custody for every child he ever claimed. Gabriel looked at the scene before him. This was not over, but justice had finally begun, and somewhere out there a man in a collar had just realized his pulpit would never protect him again. The television in Gabriel Ashford's apartment buzzed with breaking news as Ellie and Mateo sat huddled on the couch, a blanket draped over their shoulders. A reporter stood outside the now infamous Flower Building, gesturing toward boarded windows and police tape that fluttered in the wind like tattered flags. Authorities confirmed the removal of at least 6 children from what was previously believed to be a licensed group home operated by Pastor Nathan Bell, the anchor reported. Police found evidence of confinement, forged guardianship documents, and illegal medical substances administered to minors. Gabriel muted the sound before the footage cut to one of the rescued children being loaded into an ambulance. Mateo looked up at him. "Are the kids safe now?" Gabriel nodded. "They are safe. They will get help just like you did." Ellie held Mateo tighter. Her eyes were locked on the screen, even in silence, watching as the world began to learn what she had always known, that Pastor Bell had never been a shepherd. He was the wolf. Detective Janelle Park met Gabriel later that afternoon at his office. Her face was lined with fatigue, but her eyes were sharp. "We have enough to charge Bell with kidnapping, child endangerment abuse, and document fraud," she said. "And that is just from the first building." Gabriel poured her a cup of coffee and passed it across the desk. "But you have not found him." "No," she said. "He slipped out an hour before the raid. Took nothing but his phone and a backpack. Any known associates?" "Too many," she replied grimly. "Donors, political allies, former church members who turned a blind eye." Gabriel nodded slowly. "And the warrant in place. His image is on every state agency desk. He cannot go far." Gabriel reached for a file. "I want to prepare for when he resurfaces. Because he will. Men like him never give up control quietly." Park studied him. "You think he will try to reclaim the children?" "I think he will try to destroy them." That evening, Gabriel took Ellie and Mateo to a quiet neighborhood on the north side, to a modest 2-story house that had been converted into a safe home for children removed from dangerous environments. There, waiting in the living room, was Jasmine. She sat with a social worker, clutching her pink butterfly backpack, her eyes wide and wary. But when she saw Ellie, something shifted. Ellie walked over slowly, her own hands trembling. Mateo stood behind her, gripping her shirt. "Hi," Ellie said softly. "Do you remember me?" Jasmine blinked. Then, with sudden clarity, she nodded. "You're the girl in the vent." Ellie gave a small laugh. "Yeah, that was me." "I heard you crying," Jasmine whispered. "I wanted to say something, but I was scared." "I was scared too," Ellie said, sitting beside her. "But you are safe now, and I'm not going to let him hurt you again." Jasmine looked at her social worker, then back at Ellie. "Can I stay with you?" Gabriel stepped forward. "You are welcome to stay at the safe home for now," he said kindly. "But I will make sure you are not alone." Jasmine leaned her head on Ellie's shoulder, and for the first time since they met, she began to cry. The next morning, Gabriel received a letter slid beneath his office door. There was no stamp, no return address, just a plain envelope with his name written in careful cursive. He opened it slowly. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "Judge Ashford, you have made a dangerous enemy. I took those children in when no one else would. I gave them order, purpose, discipline. You gave them chaos and weakness. But I am not finished. You have declared war. I hope you are prepared to bleed for it." And Gabriel sat still for a long time. Then he placed the letter into an evidence bag and called Detective Park. "He is watching," he said. "And he is angry. We will increase security," she said. "But this confirms something else. He is nearby." Later that day, Gabriel received news that froze his breath. The Ruiz guardianship hearing had been scheduled 3 days from now. Somehow Bell's attorney had filed the petition through a back channel in a family court. His legal claim was still technically valid, pending investigation. The judge assigned to the hearing was known for her adherence to procedure, even when it came at the cost of common sense. They could lose custody, Park warned. If the judge rules by the book without considering Bell's pending charges, he could reclaim guardianship, at least temporarily. Gabriel stood. "Then we will make sure the book tells the truth." On the morning of the hearing, Gabriel brought Ellie and Mateo to the courthouse under private escort. The building was thick with tension. Media stood outside waiting. Protesters carried signs. A group of Pastor Bell's remaining supporters sang hymns near the steps, faces solemn and unshaken. Inside, the courtroom filled quickly. Bell was not present, but his lawyer Leonard Crane stood tall and confident. Gabriel sat beside his attorney, a determined family law specialist named Diane Colburn. The judge entered. Her presence was cold but fair. She adjusted her glasses and looked over the files. This hearing is to determine the lawful guardianship of minors Ellie and Mateo Ruiz. Current petition for return filed by Pastor Nathan Bell, represented by counsel. Opposition filed by Judge Gabriel Ashford, acting as temporary custodian. Let us proceed. Crane rose. Your Honor, my client regrets he cannot attend due to illness. However, he maintains legal guardianship over the Ruiz children. His care has been documented, albeit imperfectly. We submit that the children were taken from his custody without due process. Diane Colburn stood. Your Honor, my client acted on an emergency basis after the children appeared in court, seeking medical attention, having been neglected and abused. Furthermore, new evidence demonstrates forged documents, confinement, and psychological trauma inflicted by the petitioner. The judge looked down at Ellie, who sat quietly in the front row. I would like to hear from the child, she said. Ellie stood slowly. She faced the courtroom, her hands clasped tightly. Pastor Bell told me God would only love me if I stayed quiet, she began. He said pain was part of my lesson, that my mother left me because I was weak, that Mateo was a burden. But Mama never said those things. Mama said we were enough. Her voice wavered but did not break. He locked us in dark rooms. He made us take pills that made us sleep too long. I had to learn how to read by copying words off food boxes. He said no one would ever want us, but someone did. Mr. Gabriel did. He let Mateo see a doctor. He let me draw in the daylight. He didn't yell when I had nightmares. She looked up straight into the judge's eyes. I want to stay where I'm safe. The judge sat very still. Then she turned to the bailiff. Is Detective Janelle Park present? The detective rose from the back. I am, Your Honor. Approach. Park submitted a report. The judge read it in full view of the court. After several long minutes, she looked up. This court finds that Pastor Bell's guardianship was fraudulently obtained. Effective immediately, his petition is dismissed. Judge Gabriel Ashford is granted temporary custody pending full adoption review. Court is adjourned. There was silence. Then a sigh. Then tears. Then applause from the few observers who had believed. Gabriel turned to Ellie and placed a hand on her shoulder. You did it, he said. Ellie looked up at him and whispered, We did it. Outside, the press descended. Gabriel gave no comment. Instead, he took the children by the hand and walked them down the courthouse steps and into the waiting car. Inside, Mateo yawned. Can we go home now? He asked. Gabriel smiled. Yes, he said. We're going home. But as the car pulled away, none of them noticed the man watching from across the street, face hidden beneath a hood phone clenched in one hand. Pastor Bell had not vanished. He had only gone quiet, and quiet could be deadly. The storm rolled in slowly over the city, a thick blanket of dark clouds smothering the skyline just as night fell. From the penthouse window, Ellie watched the rain begin to tap softly against the glass. She sat cross-legged on the couch, a sketchbook open on her lap, half-finished drawings of Jasmine Mateo, and the flower house scattered across the page. Behind her, Gabriel paced the length of the room with his phone to his ear. No movement on the credit cards, he asked. Detective Park's voice came through the other end, tight with frustration. Nothing. Bell either has help or he planned his escape too well. But we found something else in the church basement. A ledger. It lists names. Not just children, but buyers, distributors, donations traced to shell companies. Gabriel stopped at the bookshelf and stared blankly at the photo of his younger sister, Elena Ellie, and Mateo's mother, smiling with a paper crown on her head at their last Christmas together. How many names too many, Park replied. It's not just Bell. He is part of something bigger. Gabriel nodded silently. Then we expose all of them. The following morning, Gabriel received an unmarked envelope at the front desk of his building. No stamp, no address, just his name again written in neat cursive. He opened it cautiously. Inside was a photo, a close-up grainy but unmistakable. It was Jasmine. She stood near a park fence smiling as she played with other children. The background was clearly the safe home's backyard. The message on the back was short, still watching. Gabriel closed his eyes for a moment. Then he called Park. "He is taunting us," he said. He was near Jasmine, possibly within a few hundred feet. "I will alert every unit," Park replied. "We will increase security at the safe house." "Not enough," Gabriel said. "We need to make him come to us." Park was quiet for a beat. "You want to set a trap?" "No," Gabriel said. "I want him to think he still has the upper hand. And then I want to take everything from him the way he tried to take everything from them." Later that day, Gabriel sat down with Ellie at the kitchen table. Mateo was napping in the next room, exhausted, after another round of medical tests. Though he was recovering, the damage from his past still lingered. Low weight, muscle weakness, night terrors that broke the silence without warning. Ellie looked up from her sketchbook, sensing the tension. "He is back, isn't he?" Gabriel did not sugarcoat the truth. "Yes." "Is Jasmine safe?" "She is." But Belle came too close. "So we are going to stop him. But I need your help again. Only if you are ready." Ellie straightened her jaw, setting with determination. "What do you need me to do?" The plan was dangerous but precise. Gabriel would attend a live interview with a local news outlet under the premise of sharing his experience rescuing the Ruiz children. Ellie would be there too, speaking publicly for the first time since the hearing. What the public would not know was that the interview was staged, pre-recorded, not live. Meanwhile, Gabriel and a SWAT team would be elsewhere monitoring a dummy location they believed Belle would target once the children appeared to be unguarded. The bait would be Ellie's words. They would stir the wound Belle refused to let close. The broadcast would include a heartfelt thank you to the judge who had saved them and a direct plea to other children still trapped in places like Riverlight. Belle's network could not afford that kind of exposure. Gabriel knew Belle's ego, his pride. He would not let it go unanswered. 2 nights later, as the pre-recorded interview aired, Gabriel and Park waited inside an abandoned house directly across the street from the safe home where Jasmine and other rescued children had recently been relocated. Only this time, the children were not there. The house had been emptied for the operation. Snipers covered the roof lines. Surveillance drones buzzed overhead. Inside, hidden cameras were trained on every entrance and exit. Gabriel stood beside a screen showing the broadcast. Ellie's face filled the frame. She looked calm, though Gabriel knew her heart was probably pounding. "My name is Ellie Ruiz," she said. "I used to be scared every night. I thought no one would ever care. But someone did. And if you're a kid watching this, someone will care for you too. You just have to be brave enough to tell." Gabriel turned away from the screen and looked out the window. Then came the signal. Movement near the alley. Park's voice crackled in his earpiece. 2 figures approaching the back of the safe house. One matches Belle's build. Hands off. I repeat, no engagement until inside. Gabriel's breath slowed. Seconds passed. The figure at the rear door used a key. That confirmed insider knowledge. The door creaked open. The camera caught his face as he slipped inside. It was Belle. The second man was Deacon Mark. They moved quietly, almost ritualistically, checking each room, whispering commands. But the rooms were empty, until they reached the living room and the lights snapped on. Officers surrounded them, guns raised, hands where we can see them. Belle froze, but only for a second. Then he turned slowly with that same eerie calm he had once used in sermons. "You made your move," he said to the officer nearest to him. But this is not over. He was cuffed without resistance. Deacon Mark struggled, but a taser brought him to the floor with a dull thud. Gabriel and Park entered the house moments later. Belle looked at Gabriel with something between admiration and contempt. "You think this ends with me?" Gabriel stepped forward. "I think it starts with you." The arrest sent shockwaves through the city. The footage leaked. Belle's face, once synonymous with charity drives and Sunday morning broadcasts, now became the face of a criminal empire of silence and pain. Investigations began in 3 other states. Old victims came forward. Names long buried in closed case files were finally heard. Belle's private journals uncovered from a hidden safe revealed chilling documentation of his operations, how children were acquired, how they were punished, how he convinced donors to look the other way. And among those journals was something else. A photo of Elena, Gabriel's sister. It was dated 8 years earlier, before her death. She was standing outside one of the church homes, holding Matteo as a baby, Ellie standing just beside her, clinging to her skirt. In the corner of the photo, a single phrase was written in blue ink: "Property secured." Gabriel held the photo with trembling hands. It was not just about what Belle had done. It was about how long he had been doing it. That night, Gabriel sat with Ellie and Matteo in the penthouse living room. A fire crackled in the hearth. Matteo lay asleep between them, his head resting in Ellie's lap. Gabriel handed Ellie the photo. She stared at it silently for a long time. "That was the last week we were together," she said quietly. "Mama was scared. She told me to pack fast, that we were leaving, but we never did. Belle told us she changed her mind." "She did not," Gabriel said. "She was trying to escape him. He stopped her." Ellie nodded slowly. "She used to say, 'If anything happened to her, we had to find you.'" Gabriel looked at her. "And you did." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "He will never hurt us again." "No," Gabriel said. "He will not." Outside, the storm had passed, and inside the lights stayed on long into the night. The house no longer belonged to silence. It belonged to a family. And tomorrow that family would begin the work of healing, not just for themselves, but for every child still waiting to be found. The courtroom was still as the sun rose over Chicago, casting a golden haze through the high windows. Rows of benches filled slowly with journalists, advocates, survivors, and cautious observers, all drawn to one of the most anticipated criminal trials the city had seen in years. Pastor Nathan Bell, once hailed as a moral pillar of the community, now stood at the defense table with his head bowed and hands cuffed. Gone was the white collar. In its place, a beige prison uniform. His once proud posture was still present, but the warmth that had fooled so many had drained from his eyes. At the opposite table, Gabriel Ashford sat in a dark suit, his hands folded, watching everything. On his right sat his attorney, Diane Colburn. On his left sat Detective Janelle Park, there by special request to provide key testimony and support for the children whose voices would soon take center stage. Ellie and Matteo were not present, not yet. They had been brought to the courthouse through a secure entrance, shielded from the media frenzy outside. Ellie had insisted on testifying. Matteo, though not required, had asked to come along to be brave with her, as he put it. Judge Mallory Green, known for her unwavering standards, entered with her usual quiet dignity and called the court to order. This trial will determine the criminal liability of Nathan Bell in multiple charges, including child abuse, fraud, illegal guardianship, and conspiracy to exploit minors. The court will hear both witness and documentary evidence before reaching a verdict. Gabriel watched Bell carefully. The man still smiled occasionally, mostly when the cameras panned across the room. A man with a mask who had convinced the world for too long that monsters could only be found in shadows. Bell had lived in plain sight. The first 2 days of testimony came from law enforcement, forensic analysts, and medical professionals. They outlined the evidence gathered from the Flower Building and other locations. Photos of bruises, videos from hidden cameras, inventory lists of medication never prescribed to children. Day 3 brought in Jasmine's testimony. She sat with a child advocate beside her, her pink butterfly backpack in her lap, and her voice trembling but clear. He said we had to stay quiet or the devil would find us. But it was him. He was the devil. The room had gone silent. The public finally understood. On the 4th day, it was Ellie's turn. Gabriel waited outside the witness room as she prepared. She sat in a blue dress, one her mother had made for her 2 years earlier, and clutched her half of the heart pendant tightly in her hand. Her face was pale but calm. Gabriel knelt beside her. "You do not have to do this," he reminded her. "I know," she said, "but I want to, because he still thinks we are scared." She looked up at him. "And I am. But I want him to hear me anyway." He nodded, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Then I will be there the entire time." A court officer opened the door. It was time. Ellie stepped into the courtroom slowly. The murmur in the gallery quieted to nothing. She walked past Belle without looking at him and took her place in the witness box. She sat with her feet swinging above the floor and her eyes fixed on the judge. Diane Colburn approached first. "Ellie," she began gently, "can you tell the court your name?" "Ellie Ruiz," she answered. "And how old are you?" "I turned 11 last month." "Do you know the man sitting over there?" she asked, motioning to Belle. Ellie's gaze did not falter. "Yes, that is Pastor Nathan Bell. He told people he saved us, but he didn't." The courtroom held its breath. "What did he do, Ellie?" "He hurt us. He lied to people. He told us our mama left us because we were broken. He gave Mateo pills so he would sleep all day and not make noise. When I tried to ask questions, he locked me in a room with no lights, no windows, for days." Her voice cracked slightly, but she pushed through. "I saw other kids there, kids who never smiled. Some disappeared and never came back. I asked about one girl, her name was Naomi, but Pastor Bell told me she went to heaven early because she didn't listen." "Did he ever let you talk to anyone outside?" "No. If someone visited, he made us hide. Sometimes we had to pretend we were sick or mute." "Why did you leave?" "Mateo got really sick. He couldn't wake up for a whole day. Pastor Bell said it was God's judgment, that if he died, it was better that way. So I ran." Colburn nodded. "Thank you, Ellie." Then the defense stood. Leonard Crane approached with the air of false sympathy. "Ellie," he said smoothly, "you have been through a lot, and I know this is difficult, but are you sure you remember everything correctly? You were just a child when most of this happened." "I still am a child," Ellie said firmly, "but I remember everything." "Is it possible you misunderstood Pastor Bell's discipline as abuse?" Ellie leaned forward. "He told me if I ever said what he did, I would be taken away and put somewhere worse. He said no one would believe me because I was poor and had no parents, that I was lucky he chose us." Her voice was unwavering now. "But he did not choose us. He trapped us. And we got away." The defense lawyer hesitated, then moved on. No further questions. Gabriel exhaled slowly. He had never been more proud. Judge Green turned to Ellie. "You may step down, Miss Ruiz." "Thank you." Ellie stepped away from the box and walked straight to Gabriel. He knelt and embraced her silently as the gallery erupted in quiet sobs. The next witness was unexpected, as Bell prepared to speak in his defense, claiming that all his actions were done with divine instruction, and in the name of structure and healing, the court received a note from the hallway. A woman had arrived. Her name was Leah Vargas. She was 22 and had once lived in one of Bell's first homes as a teenager. She had watched the trial on television and decided that silence could no longer be her burden. Judge Green allowed her to speak. Leah stood in front of the room, voice shaking but eyes burning. "I watched children disappear. I watched him beat a boy until he could not walk. I was told I was ungrateful for wanting more than a mattress in a locked room." She turned to Bell. "You preached about God, but I only ever saw a man who wanted power over people who could not fight back." The jury stared at Bell in silence, and for the first time, Bell did not smile. The trial concluded the following afternoon. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. When they returned, the courtroom stilled once again. The lead juror stood. "In the case of the People versus Nathan Bell, we find the defendant guilty on all counts." A gasp swept through the room. Bell sat perfectly still. Judge Green delivered the sentence without ceremony. "For the exploitation, abuse, and destruction of lives entrusted to your care, this court sentences you to life in prison with no possibility of parole." She paused, then added, "May your silence there be the first truth you have ever practiced." Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed, but Gabriel shielded Ellie and Mateo from the worst of it. They were not there for the attention. They had come to finish what had started the moment Ellie had run through the courthouse doors carrying her brother. As they stepped outside, Jasmine ran to meet them, wrapping her arms around Ellie. "You did it," she whispered. "No," Ellie said, holding her tightly. "We all did." Gabriel looked at the children around him. Survivors, fighters, builders of a new story. The storm had passed, but their mission had only begun. 6 months had passed since Nathan Bell was sentenced. Chicago had returned to its usual rhythm, but in certain corners of the city something had shifted. People walked with a little more awareness. More questions were asked. Community centers, schools, and churches had started holding open forums about child safety. And the phrase Riverlight, once whispered as a blessing, was now a cautionary tale. But in the heart of the North Side, inside a 2-story brick building that had once been another silent place, a new voice was growing louder. It came in the form of laughter echoing off the walls of what was now the Ruiz Family Center for Children. Gabriel Ashford stood in the middle of the main room watching as Mateo and Jasmine raced across the colorful mural-painted floor. Ellie sat cross-legged near the corner bookshelf with 3 younger children huddled around her, each holding a crayon and a coloring page. A quote painted along the far wall read, "You are not broken. You are becoming." Gabriel had written it himself one night long after the workers had gone home, and the final blueprints had been sealed. The center had become the full expression of everything that had changed in his life since the day Ellie first stumbled into his courtroom. What had started as an emergency rescue had evolved into something enduring, a foundation, a mission, a family. That morning, a ceremony was held in the courtyard outside the center. Community leaders gathered along with social workers, teachers, volunteers, and families whose children had once been under Bell's influence and now stood smiling with small badges that read, "Survivor and Builder." Gabriel had invited everyone who had played a part in the fight, the judge who had ruled in Ellie's favor, the doctors who had stayed up through the night when Mateo was first brought in. Detective Park, who had since taken over a new citywide task force focused on uncovering trafficking rings. Gabriel stepped to the microphone as the crowd fell silent. "Today is not about me," he began. "It is about 2 children who were failed by a system but refused to give up. Ellie and Mateo showed me what courage truly means. When the world told them to be quiet, they spoke louder. When fear told them to hide, they stepped into the light." He looked over to where Ellie stood beside Jasmine and Mateo, her chin held high, her eyes bright but steady. "This center is not a building. It is a promise that no child will be ignored again, that their stories will be believed, and that their healing will be guided with patience, dignity, and love." Applause broke out across the crowd. Ellie smiled but did not cry. She had done that already. Now she was beyond tears. She was building something. After the ceremony, Gabriel led a tour through the renovated space. The playroom was Mateo's idea. He had insisted every child deserved a place to be loud without getting in trouble. The library was Ellie's domain, filled with books she had personally selected, many from donations others purchased with the first funds raised by the foundation. In the hallway leading to the counseling wing, there were framed drawings made by the children themselves, art that showed light, overcoming dark families holding hands and suns rising over city skylines. But one hallway was different. It led to a small, quiet room tucked away behind the library. Inside, a photo of Elena Ruiz, Gabriel's sister, and Ellie and Mateo's mother hung on the wall. A candle burned below it in a protective glass case. This was the room for remembering. Gabriel stood there alone after the guests had left. He stared at the photo of his sister. "We are doing it, Elena," he whispered. "You said they would find me, and they did. And now I will not stop." He remained there for a few minutes before a small voice interrupted. "Dad." It was Mateo peeking through the doorway. He still called Gabriel Mister sometimes, but when no one else was around, he had started using the word more easily. "Are you okay?" Gabriel opened his arms, and Mateo stepped into them. "I was just thinking about your mother," Gabriel said. Mateo looked at the photo and nodded. Ellie says she would be proud of us. Gabriel smiled. She would. Very proud. That evening, the center emptied out, but the apartment above it, where Gabriel now lived with Ellie and Matteo, was filled with warmth. Ellie made spaghetti while Matteo set the table with care. They had created a routine now. Dinner together, a short walk in the courtyard afterward, story time, then bedtime. But this night was special. It was the anniversary of the day Ellie had first run into the courtroom. They called it their new birthday. Should we do the toast? Ellie asked as she poured orange soda into the mismatched cups. Gabriel nodded. Yes. You lead. Ellie stood holding her glass. To the day we stopped running, she said. To the day we found each other, Gabriel added. To Mama, said Matteo, because she sent us the best surprise ever. They tapped glasses and laughed. After dinner they sat on the balcony. Matteo lay with his head in Gabriel's lap, already drifting off. Ellie looked out over the darkened streets. Do you ever think about what would have happened if I had not run that day? Gabriel nodded. Sometimes. But I do not stay there long. Because the truth is, you did run. You did save Matteo. And you gave me a reason to be more than I was. Ellie turned to him. I thought you were saving us. You were saving me too, he replied. The next morning, Gabriel received a letter. This time it was from the Department of Health and Human Services. It approved a new partnership between the Ruiz Family Center and the National Emergency Placement Program for at-risk youth. It meant that children pulled from dangerous situations could be brought directly to the center instead of being lost in bureaucratic limbo. Gabriel read the letter and handed it to Ellie. She scanned it, her mouth dropping open. We are going national. Gabriel laughed. Almost. But we are definitely going farther than we ever imagined. Matteo cheered and ran in circles, yelling that the whole world was going to know about their house. That weekend, families arrived from across the state for the center's first workshop. There were children like Ellie and Matteo, once were frightened quiet, unsure if kindness was real. And there were volunteers like Gabriel, once had been stoic, driven unsure how to express what burned in their hearts. Together they learned. Together they healed. One child, a girl named Grace, had not spoken a word in 3 weeks. On the second day, she took Matteo's hand and whispered, Do you want to draw? Matteo did not even blink. Yes, he said. I brought my green crayon just for you. That night, as the center dimmed and the children slept, Gabriel looked around at what had grown from pain. Not a structure, not a mission, but a life. A living, breathing community built from the courage of a 10-year-old girl who once believed she had no one. A girl who chose to run into the storm. A girl who found a man who had stopped believing in second chances. Together, they had proven that sometimes the most broken moments are the beginnings of something unbreakable. As Gabriel turned off the last light, Ellie's voice called softly from the hallway. Dad? He turned. Yes. Do you think there are more kids out there like us? He nodded. Yes, too many. She stepped into the light. Then we need a bigger house. He smiled. Then we will build one. The end, but truly just the beginning. Sometimes the ones who seem the smallest carry the greatest strength. And sometimes family is not just who you are born to, it is who finds you, fights for you, and chooses you every single day. This was a story about courage in silence, love built from loss, and the healing that comes when one voice dares to speak the truth. If this story moved you, let us know in the comments where you are watching from. We love seeing how far these moments travel. And if you believe in second chances, in chosen family, and in love that rebuilds what was broken, make sure to subscribe and tap on the stories waiting for you on the screen. Thanks for being here. See you in the next story.